Hello, Upper Iowa students. Here we are in week 7 already, digging into multi-tiered systems of support, but also introducing to you today the multi-tiered, multi-domain systems of support. So here we are, let's dig in. For the contents of today's instructor video, we are going to be learning about the 3 tiers with our 3 domains. And we're going to learn from one of my favorite school counseling legends, Trish Hatch from Hatching Results. We are also going to kind of dig into some of the readings that you guys will have this week, which is where your discussion questions will come from, reading the Ask a Position statement on MTSS, but also hopefully digging into chapter 6 of Building Trauma-Sensitive Schools. If you have not read chapters 4 and 5, this is where I encourage you to kind of start early and dig into those chapters before we really kind of start looking at multi-tiers in chapter 6. You will be answering discussion questions through Pear Deck this week, but I will also have kind of more of a fun question on UIU Learn so that it is also taking your attendance. So I want to make sure that not only do you answer the 2 questions through Pear Deck on this presentation, but that you head over to UIU Learn and answer the fun one. So it counts for your attendance for week 7. And then we're going to end like we normally do, looking at the activities for this week and glancing at what's ahead. All right, so multi-tiered systems of support and the multi-tiered multi-domain systems of support. What are the multi-tiers? Well, to be honest with you guys, the first time I learned about the 3 tiers of intervention and support was when I was at Bunker Middle School. So I was probably 2 or 3 years into my career as a school counselor. And I first learned about the 3 tiers when I joined the PBIS team at Bunker. In fact, this was a team that was spearheading the start of PBIS, Positive Behavior Intervention Supports. And so I was learning all about what that looks like, creating one at a building, what those positive reinforcements are, what your major theme and message and school values are. And that's where I learned about the 3 tiers. We were creating interventions and positive reinforcements for our students. And so I wouldn't have learned about the 3 tiers until I really took part of the PBIS team and took part in also providing some of the interventions, not only at tier 1, but especially at tier 2. So looking at these tiers, tier 1 in short is kind of anything that is all students school-wide. Maybe it's all students in a certain grade level or all students in a certain classroom. But these tier 1 supports are research-based core instruction and interventions that are provided to, like I said, all students, designed to prevent behavior challenges while also encouraging academic achievement. These universal supports are based on ensuring equity and culturally sustaining and responsive support for all students, and will likely be effective for 80% of students. That's why it's that biggest chunk at the bottom. A strong tier 1 is the best way to limit the need for too many tier 2 and tier 3 supports. Tier 1 also includes looking at data and using universal screenings to understand the needs within the school. Looking at tier 2, so in short, this is a targeted small group for interventions for some of our at-risk students. Tier 2 interventions are the more targeted and specialized interventions for students who are at risk for academic or social emotional concerns. It's important to note that tier 2 interventions are in addition to and aligned with the classroom instruction provided in tier 1 to all students. Tier 2 simply involves additional interventions and progress monitoring. Common concerns for tier 2 are related to academics, attendance, or discipline. So again, those are those annual student outcome goals that school counselors we also look at. So this tier would be anywhere from about 10 to 15% of your population. So tier 1, 80%, tier 2 is about 10 to 15, and tier 3, these are the most individualized intensive interventions a school program could provide. So tier 3 interventions are, like I said, most intensive and individualized interventions, and they provide support for students that have maybe the most challenges, keeping in mind that tier 1 and tier 2 interventions would already be in place. But implementing tier 3 interventions would be above and beyond that which is already occurring and will require additional progress monitoring. The school counselor's role in Tier 3 interventions is much more of a supporter role. So we're providing referrals for outside supports to mental health agencies, maybe our school-based mental health counseling services, social services, community resources, and more. Often a school counselor kind of wonders, where do we fit into these 3 tiers? How do we support and work with the academic instruction as well as the behavioral instruction? For school counselors, we have our 3 domains working with academic, social, emotional, and college career development. The triangle is excellent for organizing what we do for all kids, some kids, and a few kids. But if we only focus on academic and social emotional, and we don't put that college and career in here, we are missing a vital piece of the important work of the school counselor. What would it look like if we also included what all students deserve to receive in Tier 1 for college and career development? So this is where you can kind of see a couple graphics I really think visually show this, and I'm a visual learner for sure. So I feel like these 2 graphics, especially the one to the right, really providing more detail of what some of those universal strategies look like, all the way up to the intensive interventions, showing the percentages again with the academic systems and the behavior systems. But let's go one more. We're going to look a little bit more at an example from an area school here in the Cedar Falls School District. This is an example of their 3 tiers of instruction, programming, strategies, interventions, I think I already said. And this is where you can kind of see at their Tier 1 level what they are providing as far as even universal screening, assessments. You can look more in Tier 2 where that additional time and support, again, in addition to Tier 1, and to Tier 3, those most intensive remediations in skills and maybe lagging skills. So again, this tier of intervention for the building is not just the school counseling program. As you can see, there's reading interventions, math interventions. So this is very holistic, looking at the school system as a whole. And again, I encourage you to look more at this. You can pause this video to take a look, or again, use the slideshow to really follow along to look more at this graphic and the examples given to you. Now, this is how school counselors are a big part of this work. The concept on the previous slides are adapted here. So we're fitting in college and career and meeting all tiers and all domains. This is essentially the deliver component of the ASCA national model. The direct and indirect services that school counselors offer, what we do with students or what we do for students. So whether in person offering direct services with students or indirect, where we are referring, collaborating, and consulting with others for the benefit of students. So a multi-tiered, multi-domain system of support in Tier 1, that looks like our school counseling core curriculum. All 3 domains were preventative in design, comprehensive in scope, developmental in nature. We're consistent, guaranteed, not random acts of counseling or random acts of curriculum. It's connected to our student standards, our mindset and behavior student standards, and what our students need. And we learn that by using data. So individual student planning, we do the academic 4-year plans for all students. What does every student receive as a part of their planning for the post-secondary options? What tools or platforms do you use? We use Zello here at Pete. We start in 8th grade in their health and careers class. We return to their 4-year plan in 9th grade, and we have high school counselors come and start talking to them about their sophomore year. Our buildings are set up as a junior high to be grades 7 through 9. The high school are grades 10 through 12. So pretty unique here in the state of Iowa. So also Tier 1 in our multi-domain, school-wide programs and activities. So our programs are ongoing throughout the school year, and they're more systemic in nature. Activities tend to be more confined to a period of time. So typically with school counseling, a specific month, week, or day. These programs and activities range in all 3 of our domains of academic, college, career, and social emotional development. School counselors are usually involved with transition programs, orientations, new student welcoming programs, at the high school college fair days, college signing days, attendance programs, scholarship initiatives, again, PBIS, bullying preventions, events like Day of Silence, Red Ribbon Week, World Kindness Day. A lot of times these programs are not consistent between buildings, even in the same district. How do we make sure all students have these opportunities? This is definitely a conversation district counselors can have, so it's guaranteed and viable. And therefore, it doesn't matter what junior high or elementary you go to, you will get these opportunities in every building. Now, moving on to the multi-tiered, multi-domain system of support for Tier 2. This includes large group, workshops, small groups, consultation, collaboration, and other evidence-based interventions. Students get here after universal Tier 1 efforts are not enough. So data can determine eligibility for Tier 2 services. Maybe that's attendance, low GPA, behavior, lack of credits earned, and more. Tier 2 does not mean simply waiting for referrals. Switch from referral driven, so asking teachers which students need it or allow students to just sign up. We're switching to data driven. So we're switching to data driven. I'll find out who needs Tier 2 by looking at grades, attendance, and behavior, and when analyzing data, provide the right intervention. So very much a proactive approach. Tier 2 is also a proactive approach where you are in a unique role to give additional attention to deserving populations, such as undocumented students or those with undocumented parents, foster youth, students with disabilities, historically underrepresented populations. The question, how do we do a better job at Tier 2 so there are less students at Tier 3? What a great question to ask, right? All right, now looking at our multi-tiered, multi-domain systems of support, Tier 3. So school counselors are not therapists, but we are trained in mental health, but more so providing solution-focused, brief therapy. Looking at short-term, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, additional support to those still not finding success after Tier 2 interventions. School counselors can then make referrals to outside resources or for students not appropriate for small groups or maybe short-term crisis response. And this is where we provide that supporter role, connecting, a master connector of sorts, where we're connecting our students to resources they would need at the Tier 3 level. So we are going to learn now from my one of my favorite school counseling legends, like I said, Trish Hatch from Hatching Results. Trish Hatch would be one of the founding counselors of sorts who has worked with a team to continue to evolve the Ask a National model. She has her own consulting company, Hatching Results, has written several books. I would say is a master at the tiered approach, but she has been one that's also spearheaded the MTMDSS. And here we're going to watch a video showing how Trish Hatch can explain this in a very great and visual way.
Hi, this is Trish Hatch, and today we're going to talk about the multi-tiered, multi-domain system of supports, or MTMDSS. As educators, we're familiar with the multi-tiered system of support, or MTSS, which focuses on students' academic and behavioral needs. But for school counselors who focus on 3 domains, academic, college and career, and social emotional development, we need a more robust system. We need a multi-tiered, multi-domain system of supports, or MTMDSS. In MTMDSS, school counselors ensure that all students receive the instruction and support they need to grow academically, develop socially and behaviorally, and to prepare for post-secondary options. In this system, activities, instruction, and intervention services are grouped into tiers, ranging from Tier 1 services, a core program of universal supports that apply to everyone, to Tier 2 services, or targeted interventions, which would typically only apply to approximately 20% of students. And finally, to Tier 3 services, intentional interventions, which would typically apply to between 5 and 10% of students. MTMDSS provides a data-driven approach to determining which of these levels of interventions or tiers are appropriate for any individual student. Under MTMDSS, Tier 1 encompasses agreed-upon services that all students receive, such as standards and competency-based school counselor core curriculum lessons, individual student planning, which includes 4- and 6-year academic and post-secondary plans, and district and school-wide agreed-upon activities and events. Tier 1 is designed to be comprehensive, preventative, developmental, and proactive. Tier 2 is designed for students who are exhibiting barriers to learning, struggling academically, or are deserving of additional supports. It uses database decision-making to select at-risk indicators such as attendance, behavior, credit deficiency, and post-secondary readiness data. Targeted intervention data elements, grade levels, and timeframes are queried to determine which students qualify for interventions. Depending on the student, Tier 2 interventions may include short-term individual or small group counseling, progress monitoring, consultation, collaboration, and referrals to resources within or outside the school building. Tier 3 services are designed for students experiencing emergency or crisis response events or to support students with needs that remain unresolved within Tier 2. School counselors provide short-term, solution-focused counseling, consultation, and when appropriate, referral to additional resources. Over time, MTMDSS allows school counselors to spend more time implementing proactive Tier 1 action plans and less time engaged in reactive Tier 2 and Tier 3 activities. The ultimate goal is to ensure all students achieve their greatest potential and graduate ready for post-secondary success.
Okay, so Trish Hatch does a great job, I feel like, explaining the multi-tiers. And can you imagine doing it in the few minutes she did? Okay, so this is a parable that Trish Hatch uses in her book. There's also a video of it, so I'm including it. This is a parable that is used to describe the MTSS. So it's called Babies in the River, and it's a wonderful parable, often told to illustrate the difference between prevention and intervention. The idea and hope is that school counselors create systems where their offices are less like emergency rooms and more planned and organized. Some programs still model each day as a roll of the dice or a crisis of the day, more like triage, but it's important to put in place a systems approach that's rooted in consistency and predictability, where there is a systemized approach to delivering services to students so it doesn't end up being random acts of intervention. So let's listen to this parable.
You know, I like to tell a story about the babies in the river, and I know I first heard it a long time ago from my colleague, Pat Martin, who used to tell the story, and I've probably changed it a lot since she told it, but the idea is that counselors, for the first time ever, were actually going to sit down and have lunch. And they were having lunch, and no sooner did they sit down and open up their Subway sandwiches than they realized, oh my goodness, babies are floating down the river. We have to go rescue them. And so out they go all the way out into the river, and they're rescuing babies and putting them on the dry ground and bringing this, doing it more and more coming. And they realize one of their counselors, Brian, is gone. And they're like, hey, where'd Brian go? He's not here. And just so we need him to pull out babies out of the river, he's gone. Well, sure enough, they finish pulling the babies out of the river. They sit down, they dry them all off, get them to their parents, and they start to eat lunch once again. And here comes Brian walking down the road, whistling Dixie, and they're like, where have you been, dude? We've been rescuing babies out of the river. And Brian says, well, I thought I'd figure out how they got in. So I went up to the top of the river. It turns out there's a preschool up there. And the preschool, oh my goodness, the preschool had a broken lock on the door, and the door was open. And a whole bunch of kids were just crawling out into the river. And I said, that's ridiculous. I think I'll fix that door. And once I fix the door, I'm going to fix the lock. And then I'm going to teach those babies to swim, so if they fall in again, they won't drown. And then I'm going to show the teachers how they can rescue these babies sooner and throw out those little floating things sooner. And then he realized, you know, at the end of it, I might have to go upstream and figure out whose idea it was to put a preschool on the side of a river anyway. That was a stupid idea. Well, the idea behind this really is for counselors to begin to think to themselves, are you spending most of your time with 10% of students? How do we spend our day? Are we rescuing babies, or are we really getting out in front of this? Do we go upstream to figure out how we could prevent this? Are we doing enough prevention education and systems change? Are we serving all students as recommended by our professional standards, by MTSS, or are we spending too much time?
And I think what she is meaning to finish with, I kind of cut it off a little bit short, but are we spending too much time with only 10%? When really our role is to look and do preventative measures at Tier 1. Going upstream and seeing how we can provide prevention efforts so that we maybe don't have to do as much at Tier 2 and Tier 3. All right, so let's get to some readings. Aligning with the multi-tiered, multi-domain system of supports with ASCA's positive statement on multi-tiered systems of support. The school counselor and the MTSS position statement was adopted in 2008, revised in 2014, and again in 2018 by ASCA. It calls on school counselors to be stakeholders in developing and implementing an MTSS that includes, but is not limited to, behavior interventions and supports such as PBIS. According to the position statement, the school counselor's role is to provide all students with a standards-based school counseling core curriculum to address universal academic, college and career, and social emotional development. So as school counselors align their work with the MTSS, and comprehensive school counseling program is designed to improve student achievement and behavior, the MTMDSS model adds the third domain of college and career readiness to MTSS, which typically addresses only academics and behavior. So here is linked to the ASCA position statement on MTSS. I want you to continue reading it, even after my introduction of it just now. Also, go ahead and make sure you're doing those readings in Building Trauma-Sensitive Schools. Chapter 6, if you've already read chapters 4 and 5, or 4 through 6, if you haven't read the previous chapters. Then here on Pear Deck, you are going to answer these questions regarding your reading in Building Trauma-Sensitive Schools, chapter 6. How is the school counselor in a unique role to put the 4 essentials into action? Also, how do you imagine using the river of feelings metaphor with either staff or students? So not the babies in the river parable, but in the chapter 6, you'll see the river of feelings metaphor. So when you do this on Pear Deck, again, you're going to type in the text box, and once you click off of it, it automatically submits it to me. But don't forget to go to UIU Learn and answer the other question for attendance purposes. All right, week 7 activities. Make sure you're watching this instructor video, following along with the slideshow, that you're reading the ASCA position statement on MTSS, reading and building trauma-sensitive schools, also responding to the slide questions through Pear Deck and on UIU Learn. And what's ahead? Next week, we're going to dig in specifically to Tier 1, universal services, talking about direct services. But then the following week, staying with direct services, but looking more into Tier 2 and Tier 3. Week 10, we're going to switch gears to indirect services and talk about Section 3, Deliver, another main component of the ASCA National Model. And week 11, going to crisis intervention and prevention, where we're also going to talk about suicide prevention and awareness. That's all I have for you guys in week 7. I hope you have a great week. Good luck with the readings, and I can't wait to read your discussion responses. Thanks so much.